If we can't find Mount Sinai, and we can't yet, there is no proof, there is no consensus of understanding. The evidence is ambiguous. Does that prove the Bible is false? No, it does not. No archaeologist, no explorer says that. Same thing with this one. And it's by the same two authors, Robert Canuck and David Halbrook. This is In Search of the Lost Mountains of Noah. And this is the discovery of the real mountains of Ararat. This was in 2001. So not only do we not have the real mountain, Mount Sinai, found yet, we don't even know where Ararat is. Did you know that there are many different possibilities and that there is no proof for any single one of them? Now, I've read several of the books in the past on the one book by the guy that says, I have touched Noah's Ark. Or there are people who claim, we have brought back wood from Noah's Ark. We have found Ararat. In every single instance, they have been proven wrong. We still don't know where the ark is. Now, does all of this prove that Noah didn't exist, that there was no ark, and there is no Mount Ararat, and the Bible is false? No, it does not. It just means we don't have it yet. That is all you can say about that. I argue the same way with the Book of Mormon. Well, you haven't found the city of Zarahemla yet. You would think a city with millions of inhabitants would be found. You would think so. But it's not yet. At least not by its name, Zarahemla, in the Book of Mormon. That's true. Can we use that as proof that the Book of Mormon is a fairy tale? You know, there are skeptics who use this lack of archaeological proof. We haven't found the Garden of Eden yet. There's many different candidates. Mount Ararat, the Ark of Noah, Mount Sinai, the Moses revelations, and so on and so forth. There are skeptics who say that proves the Bible is a fairy tale. Were you aware of that? Biblical archaeologists don't go to near that extreme. They say no. Now, in the Larousse Encyclopedia of Archaeology, you can see by the size of this, this is a pretty big tome. Pretty large tome. He has a couple of ideas expressing what is archaeology. And he discusses this. I'm going to share a couple of brief ideas. The absolute truth. Archaeology is an auxiliary of history. The word auxiliary implies a certain inferiority in the disciplines that archaeology describes. The texts from which history is formulated shed light on only a minute fraction of the past. That's obvious. All you have to do is go up into a library to see. You think you know a lot? Have you read a library yet? The fundamental reality is what we don't know. And I'm not celebrating our ignorance, I'm acknowledging it. For every book you haven't read, you don't know what's in that book. And you haven't read even a fraction of what is written, and what is found in writings is a fraction of what even existed. Anyway, that's my diatribe. This is on page 9 of the Larousse Encyclopedia of Archaeology. Documents give a particular interpretation of events. So even if we have documents from antiquity, and we have quite a few, do these shed light on objective truth and reality? No. They are also written as an interpretation of events as the ancients understood them, not necessarily as they actually happened. It's all interpretation, whether ancient or up to today. More often, there is only indirect evidence transmitted by numerous scribes who all more or less distorted the material handed down to them. Imagination often becomes inextricably interwoven with memory. Although archaeology can, from time to time, recover precise knowledge, and can thus take its place among the exact sciences, This knowledge is always severely limited. This is what I've said about archaeology all along. It cannot be used as a final proof of anything. On page 10, when archaeology has only its own evidence to rely on, all the deductions belonging properly to the sphere of history are bound to be either very vague or purely hypothetical. If any book on prehistory is examined, it will be found that along with the description of the finds from the excavations, there is usually an attempt to interpret them in the light of what we have from other discoveries. There is an effort to find correspondences between ancient texts or folk legends and archaeological facts, or they resort to linguistics and reconstruct the early forms of language. Of course, this is proper methodology. It's what all the scholars and archaeologists do. Unfortunately, these attempts seldom produce a satisfactory result. Archaeology does not have the final say-so or the final proof, in other words. For instance, until the present day, it has not been possible to reconcile the philologists' conclusions on the diffusion of the Indo-European languages with the archaeological facts. We still don't know. We've been working on that for over 100 years, 150 years. The Minoan civilizations has bequeathed thousands of frescoes, figurines, and engraved gems. But by themselves they cannot provide an explanation of the Cretans' religious beliefs and political institutions. It's mute evidence, as G. Ernest Wright noted. History and archaeology, then, cannot be substituted for one another. True knowledge of the past can be claimed only when texts and artifacts, material objects, and human testimony illuminate each other. This means that only the briefest period, corresponding to 100th part of the existence of man, of the human race, can be fully understood. Only 100th part! And then, skipping over to, he has one more idea that I want to share with you on page 22. The shrewdest and the most experienced archaeologist rarely, if ever, finds exactly what he's looking for. And often a new discovery wrecks a cherished and patiently constructed theory. Did you get that? The new discoveries destroy what we sometimes thought we knew. That's not finally proving anything. It rechanges our knowledge. Even eminent men have been known to lack the courage and humility to bow to the verdict of evidence. That's interesting. The archaeological biases. And they have tried at all costs to support their suppositions with increasingly complex and far-fetched explanations. And I have several biblical archaeologists that illustrate that theme beautifully, even up to today. Another really fine archaeological text, edited by David Noel Friedman and Jonas C. Greenfeld. Now, anybody who studies biblical archaeology are going to also recognize those names. World-class scholars. New directions in biblical archaeology. They had several archaeologists at the end of the 1960s shore up the archaeological materials up to this time. This is, William F. Albright, and anybody will recognize that name, of course, in biblical archaeology. The Impact of Archaeology on Biblical Research, 1966. Albright says, we must delimit the geographical space that is covered by biblical archaeology. It's true that Palestine is the homeland of both the Old and the New Testaments. But in order to study biblical archaeology properly, one should know as much as practical about the archaeology of all the ancient lands from the Atlantic to India. Holy Toledo, who among us does that today? Very few of us. All these countries are mentioned in the Old Testament. From the Phoenicians, this is on page 1, the very first chapter, the very first page.